Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. All right, guys. Why Britain is the center of the world?
Here's
Here?
the
Johnny Harris, great videos. Oh, why am I looking forward? Okay. Spoilers. Preemptive like. Original link to the video, top the description. Below that, link to the Discord. Click on it, send it right over there. Would love to have you. Let's go. Yeah, is it talking about the Greenwich Mean Time again, or is it something bigger? I'm gonna stop. Okay.
original one. I think there's this. Here it is. Here's the original one. I think there's this misnomer that my orange coat is dead, but no, it's just dying quickly. There's just a good amount of this going on. But I think this thing has a couple more years for sure. So, this is my desk. I sit here all day and I work and I look at this map whenever I'm daydreaming. I just look at this map. I bought this map off eBay and it was in like an elementary school and now it's in my office. I notice something every time I look at it that kind of irks me. That something is this. This zero, which is not just one number, but it's actually a corresponding line that looks like this.
I already have stuff I want to say, but
Let's back up here for a second. The Earth is divided into lines.
I love maps. I think cartography is fascinating.
Curved like they are on my map. And whether or not they're curved or straight has to do with this concept of projection, which is, I'm not going to talk about here. I've talked about plenty using a knife and a globe back in an old Vox video that I made. But just know that the Earth is divided up into lines, latitude and longitude lines, ones that go up and down and ones that go from side to side. All of these lines in the grid have a number associated with them. So for the up and down lines, there's a 0 point, and then anywhere to the right of that or east of that starts to go up from 0 to 180 with a little E next to it for east of the 0 line. And then everything to the left or the west of it has the same thing, 0 to 180 with a W for west, okay? That center point is the 0 point from which all east and west things are measured.
Coordinates still sort of confuse me, but I'd like to be able to read coordinates.
Point from which all east and west things are measured. The same thing for these side-to-side lines. If you go up from here, you're going to start to get higher and higher until you get to 180 degrees north, or if you go south, you will go 180 degrees south. Which is
cool. So the map is kind of separated into the 4 kind of quadrants that you would see in a math chart like this. Okay.
Finding out where the 0 point should be for these horizontal lines is actually quite easy. The Earth has these 2 natural poles, which make for a natural top and bottom of the Earth. And halfway in between those 2 poles, you have this perfect center point, the equator, which is a very natural place to put this 0 point and to measure everything from. The up and down lines are totally arbitrary where you decide them. Like, who's to say that, like, it couldn't be right here in Russia and this could be 0 and everything could go west and east from here?
Sure, it could be.
Or Japan, for that matter. Well, in fact, a long time ago, that's how it used to be. These maps with these grids were really, really important for navigating the world, and so everyone had to choose a 0 point. And most would just make their capital or their home base the 0 point. If you lived in Japan, you would just make Japan the 0 point, and the rest of the coordinates would be measured against that 1 0 point, which was Japan. And same if you lived in France or Washington, D.C. This was fine because back then countries kind of just fought wars and competed with each other. They weren't really collaborating or aligning or trading as much as they do today. And so everyone could just have their own maps centered around their place, and they did just fine. But then, around the 1800s, a few things started to happen that completely changed everything. First, countries and empires, instead of just competing and fighting with each other, started to actually say, like, we should align with each other and trade and be friends because that's better for everyone. Pair this with the fact that map making and sea navigation was becoming like a big industry. It was no longer just the king ordering maps to be made for their like expeditions, but now it was like private businesses going out and doing things that private businesses do. And so there was now like a demand for good seafaring maps. In short, map making was trending. Seems like a pretty good time to be alive. Okay, and there was one more thing that was happening around this time that was super important, which is this.
Roads.
Trains everywhere. Trains were just like popping up everywhere, and trains were also trending. People were now able to travel like across the country, not just like on their horses, but on this whole system of trains where you could buy a ticket, get on a train, and end up somewhere hundreds of miles away. And you know what trains run on, besides coal, is time, timetables, schedules. How do you know when your train's gonna arrive, and when it's gonna leave, and when it's gonna get there? Time, some universal set time. The problem is, back in the 1800s, there was no universal set time. Check out this piece of paper. Today, all of these cities and towns would be just on Eastern Standard Time, one time zone. But back then, every town had their own time, depending on when it was noon for them. If they were a little bit east or a little bit west of here, that would be different than in Washington, D.C. Total nightmare for trains. The lifeblood of trains is time.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense because before something like a train that is pretty predictable and when it's going to arrive somewhere, what's the point in having an exact perfect time if you know no one's really going to be able to make that time? So I don't know if that's the reason.
Time mishmash just wasn't going to work. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with this? Look at this guy. You probably don't know who this person is. I didn't know who this person was. He was the U.S. president that no one remembers. This U.S. president in the late 1800s saw a problem with all of this. He realized that having a bunch of different maps with a bunch of different 0 points based on whoever was making it was a problem. And he realized that not having a universal time zone or some sort of universal way of making the same time for everyone was also a problem. So he invited 41 countries to come here to Washington, D.C., where I live, and to sit around and think and talk about where this 0 point should be. Where should the center of the world be so that we can measure time as well as navigation? All maps could be normalized to this one spot. So after a moment of a bunch of white dudes sitting around in a room in Washington, D.C., which is kind of what's happening today in Washington, D.C., they came to a vote. And that vote almost unanimously said that the 0 line should be right here. This line, if you zoom in, goes right through London, England. It actually goes through a little outskirts town called Greenwich. Greenwich is the home of the Royal Observatory of the British Empire. This would be the place where the prime meridian, or the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start.
One of the things I love Johnny Harris's videos. I think he makes amazing videos. I think Vox makes amazing videos. Vice does. But they all have this kind of annoying underlying like anger around something, as if like this is a horrible thing that and there he goes, like it's just, can't we just learn? Why do we always have to, like I almost feel uncomfortable, like Johnny's like, why is this the center, why isn't this the center over here? And it's just like, I love the videos, I think they're so good, but there's this underlying like kind of feeling.
Country where the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start. Every country at the conference agreed that this should be the case, except for the Dominican Republic, at that time called Santo Domingo. They said no. They were the one country that didn't like this proposal. And France and Brazil actually abstained diplomatically, which was kind of them saying like, oh, we don't agree with this. France continued to make their maps with Paris as the center point, but eventually they got on board as well. So that gets to the crux of my big question of why the 0 right there, which is a bunch of people voted on it. But why were they so down with Britain having the 0 point being in the center of the world? Well, the answer is because it was 1884, and Britain was just really good at the ocean. The British Empire was by far the biggest, most powerful navy. They had the most experience with maps and ocean faring, and so it was kind of a natural choice to let Britain, the king of the ocean, have this center point. And from then on, maps started to be drafted with Greenwich, this royal observatory, as the center point for the east-west divide in the world. Over time, this exact point, exactly where it's drawn, has shifted a tiny bit because of better tools to measure things, and so it's actually not literally on the Royal Observatory anymore, but it's effectively in the same place that was drawn in this 1884 conference. But they also established that all time in the entire world would be measured against this same spot, Greenwich. Noon at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, would be the peg against which all other time was set. They called this Greenwich Mean Time. So you end up getting a map that looks like this. Zoom in and you see Greenwich is right here.
Jeez, look at China, one time zone.
It's GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, okay? You go west of here and you start to get GMT -1 or -2, -3. You can come all the way back to the east coast of the United States, and this time zone is Greenwich Mean Time.
I'm in -5.
-5 right now. Sometimes it's -4 if there's daylight savings, and daylight savings is dumb and whatever. But you get the idea. The more you go west, you go back from Greenwich Mean Time. If you go east, it's the opposite. You go forward to Greenwich Mean Time. So if it's noon at Greenwich, then this next time zone, it'll be 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., etc. So these time zones have been marked up in these kind of strange shapes. Eventually, if you go 12 steps away from Greenwich, 12 time zones, you'll end up here at this mess.
Opposite of the meridian of
this
the
mess
Greenwich.
is the international date line.
Oh, it goes
This is
between
where
Little
Greenwich
and
Mean
Big
Time-
Diomede Island, right? The islands in the Bering Strait, right?
The international date line. This is where Greenwich Mean Time +12 or -12 ends up at this line, which is where a new day starts. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. Imagine it's 4 p.m. in Greenwich, England, right here at this Royal Observatory. It is 4 p.m. GMT on May 28th. If anyone wants to send me a birthday gift, May 28th. May 28th. It's May 28th at 4 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Sitting, chilling in the Royal Observatory, which I've never actually been to. I need to go to the Royal Observatory. I need to go to the Royal Observatory.
Go,
I'm gonna
Johnny.
do that this year, next year, at some point. Okay, so it's 4 p.m., May 28th. Across the ocean here in Washington, D.C. at that time, you can see that we go from 4 p.m. -5, so 11 a.m. Okay, so it's 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. at that exact time on May 28th. Head across the United States to the west coast of the United States to Seattle or Portland, and right there it's 3 hours earlier than it is here. You're now at 8 a.m.
Ooh, what is
So it's
Alaska?
8 a.m. here, it's still 4 p.m. in Greenwich. It's still 4 p.m. in London. Now you head into the Pacific Ocean, keep going west until you get to French Polynesia, at which time it's 5 in the morning. You're now GMT -11, it's 5 in the morning. And then you get right up to this messy line. If you were to be in the Baker Islands, which is like a US, like random uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean,
Atoll.
you would be at 4 a.m. So it's 4 p.m. over in Greenwich, it's 4 a.m. on this random island in the Pacific. So then cross this messy looking line, it's still 4 a.m., but now it's the next day. It's May 29th at 4 a.m. Here in Fiji, at the same time, 4 p.m. at Greenwich, it's now 4 a.m. the next day, May 29th. So we went from being 12 hours behind Greenwich to being 12 hours in front of Greenwich just by going over this international date line.
Right, okay.
You could do this exact same
following.
thing going the other way. Start heading east and you see that, it's 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Head all the way over into Asia, and now you're getting closer to seeing how that 4 a.m. happens when you get over to Fiji. Now the caveat to all of this is, of course, is that some of these countries switch by an hour for like daylight savings type things and whatever, but ignore that. Imagine there wasn't daylight savings. Right now in this moment where daylight savings is at least end in the United States, this holds across the whole world. Someday I'll make a video about this whole messy debacle. But the point of all of this is to say that because of this conference in 1884 to reconcile train timetables and to make maps more uniform, we now have this navigation and time system that rules our whole world, and Britain is just sitting at the center of it, of course. The British Empire may have fallen and the world has moved on from Britain being the center of the world in a lot of ways, but it's still technically the center of the world in a lot of ways. I'm gonna put some links in the description for some of these cool tools that kind of help visualize time zones if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, my question has been answered. I actually didn't know the answer to this question and I went on a deep dive and now I know. So now I'll sit at my desk and I will know the answer to why it's 0, and I think that was worth it. So thanks. Big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
The whole video? Oh, Skillshare.
Skillshare is this giant repository of online.
Please make sure if this interests you to make sure to use Johnny's Johnny Harris's promo code. All right, so
tutorials where you can subscribe and have unlimited access to tutorials about everything you can imagine, from design to entrepreneurial skills to photography, videography. It's all there. I learned everything I know with online tools, including Skillshare, and
definitely have something to say.
Believe in the model of online learning. There's one course in particular that I would recommend, which is this Premiere starting course.
I just want to. I'll continue to play it. All right. After, I just don't want many people will leave by the time just the ad, and before I forget it, just Johnny Harris seems like he's a really smart guy and he makes great videos, but there's this one part about like the way he talks that he thinks like, oh, Britain's the center of the world. I don't view it like that. Like, oh, why did they get to decide? Why isn't the center of the world in Rhode Island or in New England? They were the most powerful country in the world at the time. There were trains and everything. And so, of course, they put together this thing that we still use today. And so it's not Britain's fault Britain's fault. It's not. I just don't see it as a nefarious thing of like, we're the center of the world. It was just like, we're the most powerful right now with this thing. If we're going to choose, you have to choose someplace. What, do you think they should have just drawn like a random line and then called that the center in like a lottery? And so I don't hold like the resentment that Johnny Harris seems to have when talking about this. I don't have that. I don't have the, oh, like he says, like a bunch of white men in the room. Yeah, true, but does that have anything to do with what we're? It's just I don't hold any of the resentment that he seems to hold, and I think that it all just kind of makes sense given the history, right? And I just, you know what I mean, okay? It was an awesome video. Let's continue to watch the thing. And thanks, guys, for watching. All right,
I'm gonna finish the year I switched over to Premiere from Final Cut Pro to edit my videos.
Sponsored.
I knew a lot about the fundamentals of editing, but I found that going through a course that really lays out all of the features of Premiere and refreshes all of the kind of fundamentals of editing was really important. So even if you are like an editor who's experienced, I think there's great value in going through and getting a holistic view of what Premiere can do and some of the tricks and tips that maybe you didn't learn if you haven't done any sort of formal training. Because they sponsored this video, they're giving all of you 2 months free of unlimited access to all of these tutorials, so you can try it out, see if it's a good fit for you. So click the link in the description to get those 2 months free, test it out, see if you like it. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring, and thank you all for watching. I will see you in another video sometime in the future.
Again, I don't want to come across as like I'm a Johnny Harris hater. I'm not. I like his content. I watch a lot of his videos, reacting to and just on my own time. As I do with Vox and Vice. It's just they have an underlying angle or often resentment or of something inside of the video that I really don't care about. I want to learn about the thing. I'm not going through history trying to see anyone who's like, oh, is that unfair or unrighteous, or should this be that way or this way? I just want to learn. And so I got that in the video. It's a great video, and I don't want my comments to kind of make it seem like I'm a Johnny Harris hater. I'm not. Really cool video. Awesome. Hope you guys all enjoyed that. Can answer any of the questions I might have had, or just see any comments, whatever, like to see on the Discord if that's your thing. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.